And to talk all things royal is the Daily Mirror's royal editor, Russell Meyer. Russell, great to have you back. Thank you for joining us. So, look, I spoke earlier about the royal trip to France. How was the state visit, do you think, received in Britain?
Well, hi, Caroline. Thanks for having me back. Well, I've just literally come back in the last few hours from France. And I think, if we were judging it, I think there's a job well done by Buckingham Palace. It went off without a hitch. I mean, a lot of these trips are pretty much paint by numbers a lot of the time when you've got a big state visit. You've got to go and see the president or the world leader of the country, as Charles was with Macron. The interaction between the two political leaders or the head of state, as Charles is, will be sort of watched upon by not necessarily the journalists, but many people in the country as well. And I thought it was quite interesting that Charles's visit coincided this week with the 231st anniversary of when France had decided to get rid of their own monarchy. And I mean, France is obviously a republic nation. A lot meant about the rescheduled visit from March when there was riots in the country due to the unpopular pension reforms that have been put through by President Macron's government. But, it went pretty much pitch perfect. And I'm sure President Macron will be no doubt delighted, as Charles was, with the reception that everybody was given.
And I think that's pretty fair. Look, the King gave a very well-received speech to the French Senate, receiving a standing ovation after covering the war in Ukraine and climate change. We've got a grab here. Let's take a look.
These horrifying events have once more demonstrated the fragility of so much that we hold dear. Just as we stand together against military aggression, so must we strive together to protect the world from our most existential challenge of all, that of global warming, climate change, and the catastrophic destruction of nature.
Now, the King has always been a climate advocate. Some thought that with his succession to the throne might see him become more apolitical. How do you think he's walking the line on being non-partisan on issues, or do you think Charles will take a different approach to the late Queen?
Well, certainly, I don't think a leopard can change its spots too much. I mean, we've seen previously when Charles most notably gave an interview to the BBC ahead of his 70th birthday. He was saying, listen, I'm not stupid. I know that I can't meddle like I perhaps have done in the past. You remember the letters that he'd been sending to government ministers here in Britain. We know he's an outspoken critic of certain countries and their climate change policies. And certainly here in Britain, it was fairly embarrassing because our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has rowed back on certain green policies this week. However, I mean, I was there for that speech in the Senate, and it was masterful. I mean, Charles was flitting between English and French. Another speech he gave at the Palace of Versailles was almost exclusively in French, and he really is taking hold of this role as statesman. And if you say, like you said, should we have expected him to change tact, to not be as outspoken? But I think when it's on real passion projects of his, let's say the environment, talking about opportunities for the next generation, and of course the war in Ukraine, these are huge, huge pillars of a discussion that is happening not only within the political sphere, but also across society as well. So I wouldn't have expected him to row back on it. And, I think we need to see a bit more of that from Charles. I certainly want to see more of it. He's staying true to his colours, and good on him.
Meanwhile, the first ever protest inside Buckingham Palace has occurred over the weekend. Anti-monarchists rallied inside the palace. Now, how on earth did they pull that off?
Well, again, I mean, quite the political stunt. You're looking at the picture, "Not my king" has been a phrase that has been used over the last couple of years. I think that there was this sort of gathering of the Republic movement. Republic, of course, is the organisation based in the UK, has got affiliates across the world that are sort of moving towards opening up the discussion around doing away with the monarchy. And there is more of a discussion not only happening in both of our countries, but across the Commonwealth and the realms as well. And so they got into the palace as part of an official tour, quick photo opportunity, whipped off their tops, and there you'll see it, the picture there. Now, again, a political stunt that is being talked about. But we are living in different times. I think that Charles's coronation, we saw things that we wouldn't I've necessarily seen during the late Queen's reign. Certainly a more dissenting voice, opportunities being taken by protesters that we haven't seen for many a year. And this is part of a conversation that Charles has to take on head on, I think. It's no point trying to sweep it under the carpet, no point thinking that this isn't happening both at home and abroad. And with stunts like this, with more activism, comes greater responsibility. And I think that that's definitely something the monarchy really needs to be aware of in the current age.
This week, Princess Anne's former husband, Captain Mark Phillips, he turned 75. As always, the media never misses an opportunity to rake over some old scandals and stories, including a child out of marriage and a kidnapping attempt. Will he ever survive these things? And it always makes for a good yarn, doesn't it?
Well, it does. I mean, you're looking back on it, we've had some big royal birthdays over the past few years, and certainly Captain Mark Phillips becoming 75. I mean, it takes us back through the history books. Certainly there was scandal and infighting. We've had plenty over the last couple of years, but that really was a period throughout the royal landscape which was tarnished with scandal and heartache. I mean, the Queen spoke about her annus horribilis herself, where her children were separating and divorcing in great measure. And where the scandal of Captain Mark Phillips having a child out of wedlock, a lady called Felicity Wade, who then had to produce a DNA test in order to get Captain Mark Phillips to own up to being her father. It really sort of set in motion from the 80s into the 90s a period of real destruction within the royal family. But coming at the back of that, Princess Anne and Mark Phillips had really repaired their relationship, and not only, I think, because of their two children, but for their own relationship as well. And fortunately, that it is one that they do get on, were managed to co-parent their children successfully. But as you say, a trip down memory lane is always a nice thing for us on the media landscape, and I'm sure people have enjoyed reading it this week as well.
And we know that Meghan has been involved in a trademark tussle over the last year or so in relation to her Archetypes trademark application. We understand that application has been withdrawn. Her failed podcast has been dropped. What is actually next for her?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, as I said, we haven't really seen too much of her in recent months. She's been letting Harry take centre stage. And of course, we had his book at the beginning of the year, which set alight and torched relations, really. I mean, nobody was spared, excuse the pun, from his memoir. It was pretty brutal for all the members of the royal family. And certainly he's still picking up the pieces of that relationship. I don't think he's going to be speaking to the king anytime soon. I saw some reports this week that the king had pretty much extended another olive branch on top of an olive branch that he'd given him last time, coming to Balmoral and spending time with the family. Harry had said that wasn't possible, and my understanding is they haven't spoken properly for many months. And what is next for Meghan? I mean, she has sort of moved into the background. We did see them at the Invictus Games in Dusseldorf. Huge success once again for Prince Harry that we've been all together behind over the past few years. But as I said, they've created this lifestyle where they need to earn an awful lot of money to keep up appearances. They're living in their Montecito, the not only the millionaires, but the billionaires playground in California. So she must be planning what her next stage is. Is it going to be a lifestyle blog? Is it going to be sort of a wellness book, a new podcast? I mean, the last one didn't work out too well, so maybe they've got to try and sort of sit back, regroup, and work out what their next stages are. But whatever it is, people are going to be talking about it, that's for sure.